This is going to be what should hopefully be the first of a series of pieces of how I'm making the cardigan jacket 101, which is the non-couture version, a standard version. And in this one, I'm going to show you, this is the finished part, I want to show you how I'm making the bound buttonholes for this jacket. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to tackle is my front piece. And this part here where it has all these stitching lines, that's for the quilting. That'll be the 𝐥𝐤𝐤 version. That's the quilting that I'm not doing. Alright, but I do want to mark everything else, and I have tested it out, and my heat erasable pins do erase perfectly on this fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and just mark with wild abandon on here. I'm marking the beginning and ending point of each buttonhole, and I'm going to mark where my center, this line here is my center front, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that. Let me go ahead and write. I'm just drawing where my notches are, and I think that's about it. Okay, so actually one of the very first things that I'm going to be doing is making my bound buttonholes. So instead of a thread, I'm going to make bound buttonholes, but to do that I need some little strips of fabric, okay, that are going to be lining this. But to make sure that I have my little strips of fabric on grain, I need to pull another thread. So I thought, well, I'm going to turn the camera on so you can see what I'm talking about. So here is a piece, and you know, it's just kind of cut very jaggedy. So I'm guessing somewhere around here is where I'm going to start having a complete thread. So I'm just going to select one at random here and start pulling. So I'm just going to yank this. Now this, like I said, it does have some coating on the back, so it's a little bit harder to get started. So sometimes I can just, as I'm reaching in, just keep pulling it through until I have a length that's long enough that I can start. So I just pull it. This is very hardy stuff, so. And it's almost like running gathers down. Okay, so I got that part out, but can you see where I have pulled that thread out? And it's a lot easier to see where the straight is. I have a line going straight across here where I know for sure that's my straight. So before I trim anything else, I am going to cut this little piece right along there so I have a guideline to start with. I need to cut a piece that is wide enough that when I fold it, I will have room to make a seam about 1/2 inch in. So I'm talking about something pretty close to this, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and pin it where I can keep an eye on that edge to make sure I'm still on the straight. And if you can see, this is the direction of the grain. Going up and down is this way. I'm going across this way because when my buttonholes are going across, that's going to give them the correct grain line so that they should blend in more that way. So like I said, this is kind of like this is like the cardigan jacket 101. You know, the skills that we're going through in this set, it's going to be handy for the next one. So hopefully, you know, I won't have another whole section on bound buttonholes. I can just say, refer back to the bound buttonhole section. That's my plan. So I'm going to go ahead, trim this here, and then what I need to do is stitch this up at the top. So I'm going to be running a row of stitching 1/8 of an inch in. So right along here, the entire width of this whole strip. Alright, so this is my strip. When I open it up, you can see my stitching right there. And what I need to do now is trim this so the whole thing is only 1/4 inch wide. So since half of my side is going to be a fold, the other half is going to be raw edges. So I'm just going to draw a line here so that I can trim down that side. So you can see why this whole jacket process is going to take a long time if this is the fast version. Alright, so I've got it marked, so now I'm going to come back and I'm going to trim along my line so that my entire piece is only 1/4 inch wide. Okay, so then this part is trash. Now I need to measure my buttonholes. A bound buttonhole, the hole is going to be wider than a regular buttonhole for the size of button that you need. So this buttonhole looks like from end to end, it's just under 1 inch. I need to cut 2 lengths of this for each button, but I need it to be 1 inch longer, so 1/2 inch can set on each side of it. So I need to cut a 2 inch length. I'm just going to measure off 2 inches and another 2 inches like this for each buttonhole. Okay, so like say this is one buttonhole right there. Okay, so I need to cut this same amount, 2 2-inch pieces for my other buttonholes. Because I'm doing the shorter version, I only have 4 of them, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Alright, so before I get started placing these, I actually need to extend the lines that mark the ends of my buttonholes up because I need to be able to see those. So I'm just drawing those out here. And I'm very thankful that my pen erases very, very well on this fabric because on the couture version, all of this is thread marked instead of, pen marked, which adds a whole nother degree of time to it. Alright, so what I'm going to be doing is taking 2 of my pieces and the sides that have the cut edges, okay, one side has a fold and one side has cut edges. I am lining up the cut edges along the length of my line that goes straight across for my buttonhole. Alright, so I'm lining those cut edges and these cut edges here and extending it out 1/2 inch beyond this line. So that's why I needed to mark those. So what I have are my 2 little strips just placed there. I am going to be sewing them on by machine in the next step, but I want them to hold nice and secure without the bulk of pins. Pins make problems. So I'm just going to very loosely, with big stitches, baste them on. So I'm putting one piece here at a time, making sure my edge, my cut edge, is lined up with my buttonhole mark and that it's sticking out 1/2 inch or so on each side. And I'm just going to take, a few stitches, just big, long guys, and I do have a knot at the end here, just to hold this little piece in place. Okay, I'm going to get to the end here. Make a little stitch up, a little stitch over, so I have one big thread, and then I will come back the other direction for this one. Again, making sure it's the cut edge that is in the middle. I'm going to baste it back. This is very thick fabric, so baste it back this direction. Okay. So now I'm just going to, take a couple little stitches over here to tie that in place, so it'll be easy for me to remove, but it's going to hold itself for right now. So those pieces, they're not going to fall off, they're not going to go anywhere until I actually have them machine stitched in place. So I'm going to go ahead and baste those strips on these last two down here. Alright, so now I have them basted, so what I need to do now is come back and redraw the edges of my buttonhole on top of these little strips here. I need to have those marks up on top where I can see it very clearly. Okay, so now on top of my strips I have my buttonholes marked. Alright, and I am drawing another line on here. I'm going to get you even closer so you can see what I'm doing. I need to go to my sewing machine and sew it exactly where my basting is, which is right in the middle. So what I need to do is do 2 rows, and I want my stitch length to be fairly small, 1.5 to 2. And that's usually millimeters, but and I'm going to start exactly at this point and go straight across, and this line is like midpoint in between the folded edge and the cut edge, and end exactly right here. And I want to make sure I leave long tails at each side. Don't back stitch it and everything, just leave some long tails at each side. We'll deal with those later. But on each one, so I'm going to do 2 separate rows of stitching on each buttonhole. Okay, so I have my top one done, and I'm just leaving my threads hanging out. Just try to ignore them, leave them out of your way. Now, when I want to get started, I'm using my little narrow foot because that's easier for me to see than my really big wide foot when I'm using for detailed things. Use whatever foot you have that works for you. But before I set my foot down, I'm going to bring my needle down and watch it really closely to make sure it actually goes straight into that point where I want it to. Once I'm sure it's down there, then I'll lower my presser foot, and with my stitch length set at about 1.5 millimeters, I'm going to go ahead and go forward. And get to the very end, so I see that I just took my last stitch there, lift it up, pull it out and cut it, and leave all those threads just hanging out of the way, and do the same thing with the other side. So I'm going to lower my needle into that point right there, drop my foot, and then go straight across. Right there. Okay, so just take your time. Precision's important. I'm going to do these other last 2 buttonholes, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now I'm back over here at the table, and I need to tie off all of these loose threads. And this is going to take a while, so just be patient. The way that I do it is because some threads are fairly short. I use a open-ended needle. It's one of these needles, these easy threading needles, all right? And it's the ones you just push the thread onto the end. So let's say I want to tie off this thread. There's 2 on each side. I'm just going to push the end of that thread through my needle, okay, and then stick it into the hole where it came out of and pull it in the back. Now on the back side, I should have 2 threads coming out of that one hole, the bobbin thread and the needle thread. And what I'm going to do is just make one big knot, like you're tying a big loopy knot here, okay? And I'm going to stick a stick pin through that loop into the very last stitch. Let's see if I can get you any closer here. Okay, so I'm sticking my pin into the stitch through the loop. Then I just pull the tail on the loop and it's going to tighten it up right down there. All right, so then I can clip it, you know, about 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch, whatever, away from that knot. And all the ends are inside, it's perfectly secure. And I'm ready to go on to the next one. So, you know, it takes time, but it does end up with a nice finish. All right, so this is the wrong side, and I've got all my buttonhole threads secured. So what I need to do is get ready to clip these open. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a little dot at the ends of my buttonhole, just so I can see them easier. And then draw a line right in the middle, which is 1/8 of an inch, and make little diagonal lines towards the ends, towards the end of my buttonholes. Okay? Go ahead and do the other ones real quick. Now you're going to need to get an extremely sharp pair of scissors. I am going to start off trying it with my they're 𝐥𝐤𝐤 embroidery scissors, or applique scissors, so they're fairly sharp. What I want to do is cut through, I have interfacing, you know, on my side, and my fabric, but I don't want to clip these. So if you can kind of bend those out of the way, that might be good. So I'm just going to try to get this clipped right in there and clip up to, but not through, my stitching that I just put in so carefully. So now, once I have it clipped really carefully, this is my right side, I should be able to very carefully push these strips through the hole. Oh, you know what I need to do first? No wonder it's so tricky. Take out those basting stitches that I threw in there at the very beginning. That's what's stopping me. So I need to pull those basting stitches out. They're keeping it from wanting to tuck in here. Okay, this should be a lot easier now. So I should be able to tuck these strips inside. So that the folded edge, my strips are very thick, so that the folded edge is in the middle of my buttonhole. Okay. So now on the right side, this is what it looks like. And there might be a little triangle on the side that wants to poke out. Just kind of push that under. We're going to go back and stitch it. So pushing that little edge there under. But that gives you an idea of what the buttonhole is going to look like. Alright, so what I need to do right now is to just kind of take a few large diagonal stitches just with a thread, and I'm trying to use a blue thread. I did a white one up here and it kind of disappeared. So I'm just going to use a blue thread because I think that you'll be able to see it better. And this is just through the welts, just to hold it in place, because I'm going to need to kind of manipulate it from the back, and I don't want these to get out of sorts. Okay, so you can see they're just some big diagonal stitches, just holding those little welt edges together. Oh, this is the button that I'm going to be using for the jacket, so I just thought I would show you. I think it's really pretty. Okay, this is the one I stitched in white. I'll try this one. I think it shows better. What I need to do now, that this is secure, is fold this back I need to make sure I pull this, my little triangle, and it's tiny, tiny, and make sure that those are poking out. And I'm going to need to get this at my sewing machine and stitch it right across here to secure it. So before I go over to my sewing machine, I am going to use a little pokey awl or whatever pokey thing you have handy to make sure that you can get all of those tiny little pieces out and as flat as possible. You know, just do the best you can. I know it's tiny. And then, so I'm going to do all of this side first and then come back, and I have to do all of this side the very same way. So just little short stitches, little like the same size stitches that we did these, which is like, you know, 1.5 to 2 at the most, doing those inside here, right across. Oh, it wants to focus on me, right across here. And that is about it for the bound buttonhole. Now, the back side still looks terrible, but when we put the lining on here, like pretend this is our big lining piece, there's going to be strategically placed cuts, you know, that correspond with this, so that when we put our lining on, it's going to be tucked in around the buttonhole like that. Well, neater than that, but you get the idea. So for right now, this is just the way we're going to leave it, and I'm going to call that good for this first installment of the Couture Cardigan Jacket 101 Bound Buttonholes, and I'll see you next time.